Can you hear me now?
There we
Yes.
can. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Yes.
had to change the settings between Teams and Zoom, Team and Zoom. That you never know what you're going to get. So, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for having me. I hate that I can't be down there. It's just been a lot going on here with year end. Our fiscal year end was last week, so we just got a lot going on this week. Um, I just do want to ask: is this more? And Luke, and you can direct me. Is this more of a performance update or a overview and a performance update? Do I need to go through the structure of the how LGIP works, or just basically just go over the performance?
Let's err on the side of more, Mike. So, kind of how the fund works, what its structure is, how it's currently positioned, and
Okay.
then performance.
Okay. Well, I'm going to share my screen if that's okay with everyone. Let's see. Can everyone see that now?
Yes.
Okay, and this is going to be a quick overview, and then I'll go into performance and structure of where it looks like right now. Just so everyone knows, this was created back in '83 by the General Assembly. It basically gives local governments and political subdivisions the opportunity to maximize their returns on investments by pooling with other like entities those funds, so you can compete on a bigger scale of dollars. Um, and this allows you all to focus on what your more important things that you have going on in your community. We have an experienced staff here. It's me, and I've got I started out investments in 1991 with Farm Credit, stayed there for 18 years, came over to the Treasurer's office in 2007, left in '09, went to the Retirement System Investment Commission, where we managed the state retirement fund. And then I made a trip back to the Treasurer's office in March of 2020 as Director of Investments. And I have 4 guys underneath me who all have investment experience in managing portfolios themselves, local government, well, small portfolios themselves. Just a couple items here. Everything's valued at $1. Interest earnings are accrued daily. They're distributed at the end of the month. And I'll go in a little bit later about how some of give you some numbers on what's been distributed back to the pool over the past few years. There's an iPass system, which is an internet system. That's on the operational side. I'm on the investment side. So if there are any questions around the internet or the setup of the portfolio, not the portfolio, but the account itself, I'd have to pawn y'all off to someone different there. The minimum balance is $1,000. I think I asked those folks in operations, and I think Kiowa has approximately 53 million with us right now. If I think that's correct. Again, this is just a description of the iPass system itself. It tells you where you can, allows participants to access their accounts. It enables authorized users to process transactions, view account information, and print statements. The security allows users to have full deposit or withdrawal rights or view only. And then there's a banner feature, I think, when you log in that notifies you when the monthly statements are available. I'll go through the investment options and just give you the high level of the types of investments that can be used inside the LGIP portfolio. Of course, U.S. Treasury securities, those are used, and when there makes sense to do those. We don't do a lot of them in there. If anything, we'll do some Treasury bills. Those are regarded as the highest rated or the lowest credit risk type of investment. Federal agency securities, those would be, there's two groups. One that has explicit full faith and credit. That would be your Ginnie Mae's or government national mortgage associations or the small business administrations. Those have full faith and credit backing. Implicit of the U.S. government, these are considered your GSEs or your government sponsored entities. They have an implicit guarantee, not an explicit guarantee. Those would be Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Federal Home Loan Banks, and of course my favorite, Federal Farm Credit Banks. We can participate in some of those. We currently do not have any of those in the portfolio right now. Some other items, municipal securities, you should be probably familiar with these, issued by states and counties and cities or political subdivisions. Certificates of deposits or CDs, we do use those some. Repurchase agreements, these are strictly overnight securities, and it's basically you buying a security from a bank with an agreement to buy that security back at agreed upon time and price. That's overnights. That's all that we do. We don't do any term repurchase agreements. Corporate debt issued by corporations in various forms, including bonds and commercial paper. We typically do a lot of commercial paper, as you'll see when we go through the portfolio. And then the three investment pillars: preservation of capital, liquidity, and obtaining a reasonable return, in that order. Preservation of capital is always going to be at the hierarchy of not just our local government investment pool, but any investments that we do for state agencies as well. So that's kind of the gist of the portfolio and how it's kind of set up. I'll go into pull up another presentation here.
Mike, two questions while you're going in. One is, what's the minimum credit rating for your commercial paper? Is it A1, P1, or?
We're going to go through that right here.
Okay.
So,
And then the second question, you probably get to this.
Yep.
Do you buy any agency mortgages, or are they just agency debentures?
debenture.
Thank you.
I threw this together this morning. I cobbled a couple of things together just to kind of give you an idea of another look at it. So portfolio description, subject to the CIP. The CIP is our internal comprehensive investment policy. We do have a state statute that tells us what we can and can't do, but it's a very wide statute. So our comprehensive investment policy takes that statute and it stratifies it down and puts a lot more guidelines around it. You can find that on our website. It's not called the CIP on the website. It's called the IPS, or Internal Policy Statement. I have no problem with sharing the full CIP with you all. If you would like to see that, you're more than welcome to. But it's invested in a diversified range of liquidity securities that is sufficiently liquid. We have to maintain 10% in daily liquid assets within the portfolio. No maturity of past 397 days for corporates and 2 years for government securities, and a weighted average credit rating of at least A1, P1. So it's all top tier credit rating. The weighted average maturity of the portfolio as a whole cannot exceed 90 days, and the weighted average life should not exceed 120 days. The difference in that, you could have some securities that have some callable securities in there, which will shorten that days up to, within the 90 days. The objective, and we just touched this, preservation of capital, maintaining liquidity, and providing a competitive interest rate. So this is just a snapshot of, and I've got all the names X'd out because we don't share the names of of other participants. This is just to give you a snapshot, and this is as of 3/31 in the top corner. This is not performance data, but this is at 3/31. We have a quarterly investment managers meeting every quarter, and so this is the most recent updated one. We will have one in August where I'll have June data be updated. I could more than happy to share that with you. But this just is a snapshot of our top 20 participants, and this kind of gives you an idea of our top 20. You can see there's basically almost 2 billion. They're our top one that holds. The two largest participants continue to dominate the composition of the book, so they're slightly 19% of deposits, and the top 20 account for 63% of the total deposits. But this is really just a snapshot of the size of the participants in the portfolio.
And would that size generally correlate with the size of the city or the town?
Typically
County.
it would. You are correct. There are a lot of school districts in here as well, so there's some big numbers and some school districts as well.
And we would be about 0.3% of the overall portfolio at 50 plus
Correct.
million dollars.
Correct. Just the number of participants, and again, this is as of March 31st. And this is just shows how the participants have grown over time. Currently, there's 379 participants. Now, of that 379, there's probably about, give or take, 1,400 different accounts. Each participant can have as many accounts as they want to have set up. We have some that have maybe 5 different accounts set up where they have a building or capital projects account, a true cash account for daily operations. There may be some long-term money that they put in there that they're not just parking it and they're not going to touch. But there's no limit to how many accounts that you can have. But the actual participants, there's 379. That was as of the end of March. The monthly distribution, this is the amount of money that's paid out to the entire pool at the end of each month. And so, end of March, the March payout was 57.7 million to the pool, and then your portion is paid out through the iPass. I think it's automatically, that's an operational function, but it's automatically paid into your account and roll back into your portfolio. To give you an idea of how much this fiscal year, up through May 31st, I don't have June's data, but from July 1 through May 31st, the portfolio has returned back to all the participants approximately 600 million this year, which is down a little bit from last year. Last year was about right at 700 million. That's a combination of lower rates and the portfolio's value as well. The participant yield, this is, and I'll touch on where it's at currently, but as of 3/31, the yield of the portfolio was 3.86. As we sit here today, as of through yesterday, that current yield is now 3.92. And the market value of the portfolio through yesterday was 15.6 billion of the portfolio. Here's just some performance data. This is through 5/31. This we'll just touch on the year-to-date numbers, or each year. You can see it in 2025. The net return was 4.56, and the benchmark that we're judged off of was at a 4.35. So we've exceeded that benchmark approximately by 19 basis points. And you can see as we go through year to year, we consistently outperform that benchmark each year to year. So we've done well with the dollars that we've been given. We've done well with those. And excuse me, and this is kind of the last page, and I'll open it up. We can talk just in general. These are some statistics that gives you of the portfolio. Remember, I mentioned that the weighted average of the maturity of the portfolio is 90 days. We're currently running at 73 or about 74 days. When the rates are in a rising rate environment, we will shorten that WAM, that weighted average days. We'll shorten that up because as rates are increasing, we want this portfolio to turn over quickly so that we can participate in those rising rates and take advantage of those. As rates start to slow down and they're rate rising, and even when there's talks of cuts, we will typically start extending that portfolio out now to take advantage of some higher rates before those rates decline. So we've been running about 70, 74 for the past 6 months or so. Current yield, or the average monthly yield as of 5/31, is 3.96. Remember, I mentioned in March it was 3.86, I think. That's what I mentioned. And then the index, the benchmark that we're judged against, its yield was 3.69. The maturity distribution, this is simply how the portfolio is stratified out over the maturity range. You can see, as I mentioned, we have to have 10% daily liquidity. We have currently in 1 to 7 days, we have, again, this is May, as of May, we had 32% in 1 to 7 days. And then 8 to 30 days, we had basically 10%, 31 to 90 days, 32%, 91 to 180, 15%, 181 to 270, 453, 4.53%, and then about 7% in the 271 to 397. Sector composition, this is where we talked about what investments we can participate in. And I mentioned that commercial paper is a big product for us. We can see that at the end of May, we had 45% in commercial paper. CDs, we had basically 25. Asset-backed commercial paper, which is strictly equipment and banking commercial paper. We had about 19%. Corporates, true corporate bonds, short corporate bonds, 5%. Overnight repo was at 4%. And government was at 1.8%. And then the last statistic, and here's where if you had a CIP, you can see that we're limited. Even tier 2 is, and Luke, you know this, tier 2 is still a top rate, still investment grade rating. We don't participate in tier 3, which is still investment grade rating, but we can own up to 10% in tier 2 ratings. Everything else has to be tier 1 top rated. We typically max out that tier 2 as close as we can to 10%. Reason being, and in that tier 2, there is a substantial, well, I say substantial, there's about a 7 to 8 basis points pickup in yield in tier 2 versus tier 1 commercial paper or other investments in that. So, but we've seen, over the past, and that's all the presentation I have, but we've seen over the past 2 years a dramatic increase in the portfolio balance, and a number of new participants have joined in. We had, particularly in school districts, we had a lot of charter schools over the past 2.5, 3 years that have opted into it. And then here recently, several fire districts have also joined in the pool itself. There has been discussion. This is something that's down the road. This is a short-term LGIP. There has been some talk about how do we go about maybe setting up a longer-term LGIP. When I say longer term, something that can vest maybe out to 2.5 to 3 years at the max. For that, and that would be for any type of funds that are longer dated capital projects that you're not going to use for a while, that you could park somewhere. But there's been some talks and discussion around that, and I just got back from a conference, the National Association of State Treasurers Conference, and talked with some other states that have that type of product to try to get a feel for what has to be done to set that type of structure up. So there is talks in house about looking into that. So, any questions?
So, Mike, a couple questions. Probably
Sure.
The biggest one is one of the biggest drivers or two big drivers. You've got credit and you've got maturity or duration. You're running about 74 days. How is that determined? Do you guys do that? Do your investment managers do that? How do you think about that number? And where do you think interest rates are going? You think they're going to go in this front end of the curve? They're going to continue to stay here and drift upwards, or what do you think about those two questions?
The first question is, our investment manager does dictate that. They do that in consult with us. And it's funny because we're kind of, when I say we're, I'm talking about Treasurer's office, we're kind of a square peg for a round hole for them, because they're not used to investment staffs questioning or looking at every trade every day. And we do that here. There's not a day that doesn't go by that my team's not looking at every trade, be it either in LGIP or in our other portfolios that we manage. We look at just to make sure that, all right, does this make sense to the portfolio for what they're doing? And then we have discussions. We have a monthly meeting with them, and then we have ad hoc meetings that pop up, during the month. As far as where interest rates are going, I think that's gonna hover kind of where we are around the front end of the curve right now, until we get get away from some of this volatility that's going on and overseas and stuff. And there'd been talks from what I hear, at one point of interest rates. The first interest rate movement might be an increase maybe in the first half of next year. So I don't see the front end going down that much before then. So hopefully, that stays up, and we'll take advantage of some of these longer dated securities out there, so we can continue to lock in some of those good rates for the portfolio.
Yeah, I would have thought they might have been a little bit longer in weighted average maturity, given kind of the view that most of that rate increase is priced into the marketplace.
Right, and again, it was short. Earlier in the year, that number was down to 40, so they have been steadily increasing that out, taking advantage of those.
Have there been any guideline violations in the past year?
There have been no guideline violations within LGIP.
And then the other question I have for you, you mentioned that the state is looking at a longer duration or longer maturity LGIP type structure. We can buy, as a municipality under state government, we can buy up to 7-year maturity treasury notes. Is that the kind of build you're looking at, where you had that flexibility to go out to 7 years in a different fund? Or have you thought about that structure yet?
I don't think we're going to look at going out that far. I think it would be something, again, Luke, it'd probably be 3 years and in, if I had to guess.
Okay.
Maintaining the integrity of the pool structure is going to be the hardest thing, because there's probably not going to be a lot of participants that want to jump into that. And then the concern I have is, say you've got 5 participants in it, and one of your bigger participants decides to take a chunk of money out. That throws off the yield and for the remaining participants to eat up where they're used to getting a little bit more bang for their buck. So, and decreasing the balances so quick. So there's got to be a lot of structure put around how this works. And I'm just throwing things out there, where if you got to have it in there for a minimum amount of time. If you pull it out before then, there may be a penalty. I don't know that to be true yet, but just some thoughts around that. There's got to be a lot of structure. I know Georgia used to have one. I'm not sure. And I never got to talk with the individual when we were at the conference. But in they've got some that I'm looking into their guidelines to kind of see how they're set up. But unfortunately, they're a bigger fish to fry here at the Treasurer's office right now, because we're getting ready to go through a full upgrade to a new SAP system in the next year. So that's going to eat up our bandwidth. So
for my other council members and for the public, a couple of notes. One is, this is equivalent to what used to be called an old 2A7 money market fund. So very high quality, very high liquidity. They talk about never breaking the buck. These guys are still priced at $1. In bond space and investment space, this is about as safe as you can get, short of putting the money in a mattress. I would argue it's even safer than owning just treasuries, because treasuries don't have default volatility. They've got price volatility, though. So this is where we want our money to be. We don't want to be speculating with the money we have. We want to just earn money, and it's called sleep well at night. You want to be able to sleep that, no, we wake up tomorrow and we're going to have $53 million and $2 tomorrow, or $53 million and $5. Number 2 is, he talked about performance, and he said he was about 20 basis points ahead of the index. In money market space, that is spectacular performance. You usually expect a money manager in money market space to beat the benchmark by 2 or 3 basis points after fees. Beating it by 20 is, you're probably top quartile, top decile, probably, Mike, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's excellent performance. And it's not hard to do, but it requires very good diligence, requires very good credit work, and very good interest rate anticipation. And your manager's federated or?
That's right. That's
Yeah,
correct.
Federated is so they supervise Federated, who manages. Federated has a long history of great money market management, great bond management. They're probably second only to JP Morgan and Capital Group, but that's another story. But they do a very, very nice job. So we've looked at this for 3 years or so. It's exactly where I think we should be. We've had other people come in and talk to us. We've put out RFPs in the past. And where we come back to is, for us, my recommendation is this is the best investment for us, and they're doing a great job. So I'll open up to questions to the council.
The Councilmember Farrell, just following up on that, and I wholeheartedly support the continued course of action. Just a little bit of additional context. State law does significantly constrain the range of investments we could invest in away from the LGIP. We could go out a little bit longer duration, and we might be one of the relatively limited number of municipalities where that might make some sense, but no stocks are allowed, no private credit, no private equity, or anything even close to that. A lot of the other product has to be collateralized. There are a lot of headaches associated with investing separately. There's a reason, I think he noted there are 379 participants in the LGIP. There are like about 270 municipalities in the state of South Carolina and 40 counties. And probably 100 to 200 special purpose districts. Some are very small. Point is, virtually every one of them is investing through this. Maybe the largest counties or cities have a finance or investment team structured that they could go outside, but it just wouldn't be worth the candle. For us.
It would not be my recommendation. Even though, we talked about it very early on in my tenure, and looked at other investment managers. We had them bid and priced it, and for the price, for the value, for the returns, and for the customization for security we get. I would argue strongly this is the right investment for us. And they're doing a great job.
Yeah, one other item I failed to mention, and I'm sure you all are aware, is the access that you have to your money. You put in a redemption request. By 4 o'clock today, you have it in your bank tomorrow morning. So that in itself is having the availability to your funds as needed is a big plus.
So just, Mr. Addy, as you work through the process of looking at alternatives, we certainly got an expert on the dais up here, as you can ascertain.
You do.
I come out of the private investment world, but the side of the world which you could not invest, and I would not recommend investing the side of the world that I come out of. But I think this would be, Kiowa would be the type of entity that would have some appetite for probably a little bit longer duration. We don't have to have, the liquidity to the same extent a lot of others do. But having said that, if and when it comes to that, we might be willing participants with regard to at least a portion of our portfolio. But I understand that, we're only 0.03% overall right now, and we're not going to be driving that train.
Right. And most definitely keep it. It will be well publicized when we start to work through that.
And full disclosure for the board and for the public, I've known Mr. Addy for pretty close to 20 years. I've managed money for the state of South Carolina back in my day with JP Morgan. I spent a lot of time at Capital Group talking to both Mike and his team and the treasurer and other parts of the state of South Carolina about different investment strategies in fixed income. So I've known and I've trusted Mike for a long, long time. And so that does go into my thinking. I know what a strong Southern gentleman he is and what a great advocate he is for the state. But they do a super nice job for what we're asking them to do.
Very kind words.
Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you, Mr. Addy. Appreciate your time.
Mike, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Y'all have a great week.
Next agenda item is updates. I have a few. This may take a few moments, and this is for the benefit of not only the community, but my fellow council members as things kind of happen every day. First, just on a kind of 4th of July recap, because there was a lot going on around the island. I hope everyone had a safe and enjoyable holiday. It was certainly a warm one, and it continues to be, and staying out of the sun and being hydrated are very important. I really especially want to thank the folks that were on the front lines on behalf of the town. Over the course of this last weekend. That includes all of Beach Patrol, who had, fully staffed up, 8 people a day, obviously out in the heat, and attending to maybe a record number of visitors on the island. I'm not sure if from the resorts case that was true, but there were a lot of people on the island. We'll come back to those numbers in a minute. Beach Patrol handled a wide range of issues, including attending to a lot of encounters with stingrays and jellyfish. But I also want to commend our Public Safety Director, Craig Harris, and his team, our community service officers, who were out in the heat, in the sun, standing at the front intersection for days, for all of Friday and Saturday, when we had extraordinary high levels of traffic. And things were backing up at various times, including all the way back to the roundabout. And I want to come back to that in a moment, but just really a shout out. And I believe I've also seen some email traffic, and although they're not town employees, acknowledge the folks that the efforts put in by the Kika staff at the front gate as well. And actually, I would say the county park staff as well, standing out and managing all the traffic that was coming into the county park, because it was backed up and there were 3 or 4 hour delays before you could get into the park. Fireworks. We had a resort put on a couple of shows. There were some issues with regard to the sanctuary show. I think it finally went off about 40 minutes late. I was down on the beach, but did not stick around for the delay. Well past my bedtime, but I think a lot of people did. But the thing that I want to point out that we're going to have to think about a little bit more closely in the future, and we discussed this at senior staff, is the permitting process and oversight of the vendors. And I suspect KIGR may or may not be looking at that as well. But I don't know if you were aware that the same vendors was providing services to the club and to the resort. And on Friday, on the 3rd, there was the cacique outside the town's jurisdiction, but the show ended about 8 or 9 minutes in. It was shut down by the fire marshal. It turns out that there were numerous violations discovered with regard to the maintaining of equipment, pressurization of water extinguishers and other suppression materials. I think fireworks went off, some did, at about 20 or 30 feet above the ground, and started several small brush fires. It took about an hour and a half for St. John's Fire District to put out. There was after that, and so we're going to get an after action report, but the preliminary report for St. John's Fire District identified at least 5 different violations of either county or what potentially it wouldn't be implicated in this instance, town ordinance or state fire code issues. So there was a real question as to whether, in fact, because it was the same vendor that was going to be providing services the next day to the resort, whether those were going to go off and schedule. And I know Craig and St. John's Fire District and the fire marshal were spending a lot of time with the vendor, making sure that everything was where it should be, that all the systems were up to date at that point in time. There were numerous conversations with the vendor. Ultimately, it looked like Night Heron was successful and went off on time. And it looked like a successful show down at the sanctuary, albeit it went off about 40 minutes late. Attributable in part, I think, to wind, but I'm not sure if that was wholly. It's not.
About extra precautions to
Yep.
get it set up properly
Yep.
on the ocean.
Yeah.
Normally, the system is set up at Mingle Point and transferred to the both Night Heron
Yep.
and the ocean or the ocean at Sanctuary. They required the one at the ocean to be set up down there, and evidently it was set up took longer than they could get it done. So we are not happy with it. It's interesting, though, that the same vendor did Yorktown, did Sea Island, did a whole number of them. The company's big.
Yep.
We happen to have their guy who's going to be retiring now.
Well, and again, there were some issues with the equipment being not up to date with regard to inspections. Again, some equipment wasn't appropriately pressurized. Didn't appear that at least at Cacique it was as well staffed as it was supposed to have been.
I don't think it was inspected in advance. Ours is always inspected, and I don't know why it wasn't inspected, but I think that led to part of the problem too.
Well, and again, we've just kind of taken it at face value. If you have a certificate from the state, then that's okay. But I think maybe going forward, and particularly at this time of year, when we've had drought conditions, you need to be extra careful. So, anyway, thankfully, no real injuries, and everything did go off, even albeit a little bit later. But lessons to be learned, and I think we'll approach this a little bit differently next year. Another issue, and Stephanie can touch upon this a little bit more. We were getting some reports from Seafields, and it appears that it was a little bit more widespread than that there were significant water pressure issues at Seafields on the 3rd and the 4th. Apparently, there was no water, but the water pressure was so low that there was actually no water on the 2nd and 3rd floors. And for a facility like that, that becomes problematic. They also have a assisted living facility. Appears that it was also impacted MUSC and maybe parts of Freshfields Village and Delin as well.
And do we have any idea what the cause was?
Well, Stephanie's been spending a lot of time with both Charleston Water and St. John's Water. Part of the frustration, we got a lot of email traffic from the Kimberly Bortz at Seafields. The particular concern was there was not a lot of communication about what was going on. They were reaching out to St. John's Water District and Charleston Water District and weren't getting a lot of calls returned, so there was not a lot of information at the time. And it persisted, came back on. I think the water pressure restored at least at some point on the 3rd, but there were issues.
Was it a line break or a mechanical issue?
I don't think we know. A lot of demand. Just a lot of demand may have been part of, what's that?
No, so so Charleston County Water, so St. John's purchased their water from Charleston County as well as KIU and Seabrook Utility. The issue, it appears, it wasn't a water issue, it was a pressure issue. So St. John Water, when they discovered that there was a problem with the pressure, they then got on the phone with Charleston Water System. And as of my conversation this morning, they still don't know why it happened. It happened 2 days in a row, July 3rd and 4th, between set times. Right now, Charleston Water is saying that it could be from excessive heat and demand. It appears that it impacted the buyers. So St. John Water purchased their water from Charleston Water. I haven't talked with Becky Dennis, but I'm guessing the reason why the island wasn't impacted, even though Kiowa Island purchased water from Charleston County, is that their system has the ability to reboot the pressure. So again, it wasn't a water issue. Everybody was receiving water. They just didn't have the pressure. As an example, Seafields or Andelin, they were getting water at the first level at low pressure, but they couldn't get it up beyond the first level. And of course, St. John Water and Charleston Water is still working through and trying to understand what happened, because as of right now, they don't know. It just stopped for maybe 2 or 3 hours on the 3rd and 4th, and it was a pressure issue, but not a water issue. So they're still working through that. St. John Water did reach out to Seafields and Andelin. They now have numbers for them as well as I do, so that we can reach out to St. John Water in case things happen and we can't get a hold of them during normal business hours. So we had that information. I did ask if any Charleston Water direct customers were impacted. St. John just doesn't know. I still need to talk with Charleston Water, but they do know and heard that some customers on James Island was impacted, and they do get their service directly from Charleston Water. But again, it just sounds like it was they're both saying it was a pressure issue, not a water issue. And they're attributing it to heat and supply.
Yeah,
So it may be an issue that in the, yeah, you know, may be one of those things that as we look at all our kind of utility service providers, that we want to kind of continue to evaluate the lines of communication, infrastructure-related issues, get a better handle on what exactly, if we get after action, it would be good to get an actual after-action report on this.
so we may want to consider booster pumps in the system or a water tower. Water tower would do it as well.
Yeah, the booster pumps, I think, is a better idea. Yeah. At the same time.
I'm not
So I want to come back to one of the biggest challenges over the course of the the holiday weekend was traffic management. And again, yeoman efforts on the part of CSO, our folks that were stationed at one point, because traffic had backed up to the circle. This is the second holiday in a row where we've had periods where the traffic is backed up to the circle, which is not just a quality of life issue, it's a life safety issue as well if there's an incident. You know, what can be done? But we had CSOs at the main intersection, back at Little Rabbit, trying to make sure they divide lanes, and going all the way back to Old Cedar, trying to help people get in and out of Cacique at that point in time. You know, there are appears that some of this is just a lot of volume, but also attributable to kind of changed access policies and more folks having to go in through the left lane, the left side of the main gate than the right side. And, you know, we don't control, the town doesn't control gate access issues. I know there are ongoing conversations between Kika and the resort around technology solutions and others. There's stuff about gate solutions baked into a potential omnibus agreement with Kiowa Partners in the context of the ARB transfer. But we've got to collectively figure something out in this regard. We will be meeting, the administration will be meeting with the Kika administration later this week to kind of do an after-action assessment and try to figure out if there are some interim things that can be done. I think, as everybody knows, and this came out of the Kiowa Island Alliance discussion, is that the Community Association has retained a consultant that's supposed to be reporting out here in the next week or two, in the middle of July, on potential options. I think there are some things that can be done from a traffic management standpoint. I'm particularly impressed by what the county parks is able to do in terms of always having at least 3 or 4 people out as soon as cars come up.
Chick-fil-A thing.
Yeah,
They've got 'em
Chick-fil-A
stacked up.
thing,
Yeah.
and managing that flow very effective. If you haven't been down there, when you're pulling up, before you even get to the gate, they have 3 or 4 young people out there all the time. They've got their little iPads or what have you.
Oh, that's the Chick-fil-A?
Yeah, and then,
Taking
you know,
orders.
you know, making sure they'll tell you where you are in the queue and, you know, potential delay and loop people in and out. But my own personal view is one of the obvious long-term solutions, it doesn't solve for everything, is an off-site Kiowa Visitor Center. And ideally on land that's owned perhaps by an entity related to somebody that's in the room, but not owned by the town. But I think the town would be willing participant in trying to provide a solution in that regard. But that has to be part of the solution. It's not. There are some, you know, multiple moving parts, but just this, we cannot continue to have these periods where, You know, it's literally, it's impossible to get on the island.
Great.
This anecdotal,
Yep.
bad data sampling, but I walked and biked and drove through there a number of times each day. I was surprised the number of times I saw nobody in the left lane and all the traffic was going through the right lane.
On Thursday and Friday?
And Saturday.
I mean, it's Friday and Saturday? That's interesting, because we ran errands out and came back about 10 or 10:30 on Saturdays, backed up to Andell West then, not quite the roundabout. I went out 3 more times and was with the CSOs at the main intersection, just trying to kind of monitor what was going on. That was on Friday and a couple more times on Saturday. It was always backed up in the left lane, at least when
I saw like 3 or 4 times it was
Okay.
clear, but more times than not, it was
But
packed.
that's part of the conversation I think we want to have with Keek, and we'll sit down with them this week. And I appreciate Shannon and Jody and Mike Lamb's willingness to do that. So we'll be getting together later this week and hopefully have some ideas or suggestions about modest steps that can be put in place to mitigate the challenges. It's hard for me to justify putting our CSOs and having them stand out there all day long trying to help mitigate when we don't ultimately, the town doesn't control what's going on. It's a Band-Aid solution. So.
Part of why I call it the DMZ.
Okay, traffic, and that'll be an ongoing discussion and part of the next Kiowa Island Alliance meeting and maybe some discussions hopefully in the interim. But I'm hopeful that the key players can sit down together sooner rather than later and try to work something out for a long-term solution, and we'll look at interim, smaller solutions in the interim. Captain Sam Spit update part 1. I'll come back to part 2 in a second. Everybody is, I think, generally aware. We've kept people apprised of where we are with the settlement agreement that was entered into now. How many months ago? Several months ago. You know, it was always conditioned upon the state legislature funding the state's $32 million commitment, and they were supposed to do that prior to adjournment, sine die, which occurred, almost 2 months ago now. There was a budget conference. The House and Senate created a budget conference, a budget committee, conference committee to try to resolve issues prior to the end of the fiscal year, which is now lapsed. Given the range of issues, they passed a continuing resolution. And that's where we are right now, because the conference committee met, 2 weeks ago? 20th, 15th, or? If you go back and watch the hearing, they did not resolve all the outstanding issues. So the state is, as of now, operating under a continuing resolution, which is feds do it all the time. Very unusual for states to do that, to not complete budget work, which means there is no funding at this point in time. They are meeting again on the 14th, a week from today. And whether there's going to be a budget agreed to at that point in time, I don't know. Again, the public meeting that they held last week, there was no mention of the $32 million. Now, whether that's a gating item or not, I don't know. There are other issues that are involved. So kind of stay tuned. Stay tuned. But at some point in time, we're going to have to, either they're going to provide the money as per the agreement, or they won't, in which case we're back to square one, and then maybe we're looking at other squares as well. So we'll have to see how that all plays out.
Mr. Mayor, just so I'm clear, so the whole state budget is not passed, and that's the continuing resolution piece we're working on.
Yes.
So, and then the CSS agreement is just one component of the overall budget that's to be passed.
Yes,
Okay.
this is not, there are more substantial differences between the House and the Senate on a wide range of matters. Now, whether they've resolved this one in those conversations, we just don't know. I don't know if you have any additional update. The last we had heard, but this was before the last budget committee meeting, was kind of really don't know. Cautiously optimistic, but don't know. We do know that one of the 6 members of the conference committee, Senator Peeler, is opposed to providing any funding support. But the thought was there was still a majority support for the funding for the Sam Spitz settlement, but we don't know.
Well, that's good.
The next update is with regard to the Civic and Community Center, I won't we're still in the process of finalizing the design documents before going to develop construction documents. There's still some design tweaks. The thing I did want to update everybody on in particular was the issue with regard to whether we're going to end up being on septic system or whether we're going to be able to connect to sewer. Sewer would be provided by Seabrook Island Utility Commission. Just to kind of reset and refresh kind of where we've been, the town first approached Seabrook Island Utility Commission more than a decade ago now, before this facility was built, to be able to connect to the force main that runs right along the road we now own up to Hope Plantation, Kiowa River Estates, or to some other facilities, either on the roundabout, which we own, where Seabrook Island Utility also has facilities. That request was denied more than a decade ago, kind of in a summary, rather summarily. The stated reasons at the time was outside our covered area. What's the term I'm looking for? Service area. But that wasn't really an explanation, because you could have easily brought us into the service area. And then it was also described as a capacity issue, which it's turned out not to be. I mean, this is literally a drop in the bucket compared to overall capacity they've got to service. So it just kind of sat there. Before we started really down the path on this particular facility, my hope and expectation was that we could re-engage with Seabrook Island Utility and get sewer connection in conjunction with not only the new addition, but get this facility off of septic, because that's better for the environment. This is a facility that serves the entire community. So Stephanie and I sat down with the chair of the Seabrook Island Utility Commission, the manager, a little over a year and a half ago. December, I believe it was December of 2024. The answer at that time was, no, sorry, we're not interested. As plans developed here and had conversations with various town of Seabrook Island council members and the mayor, thought we were making some progress to potentially get sewer connection. So we had a series of meetings back and forth just a little less than a year ago. But it was still kind of no, but it was not quite as hard a no until kind of when we were at the same time, as you recall, passing a utility change to our utility, our municipal code dealing with utilities that would have mandated any utility provider to provide service to a customer if they were willing and able to pay the cost of connection, which caused some heartburn there. We engaged separate counsel. There was some additional back and forth. And again, it wasn't clear that there was any real progress. So we started down the path of having a septic option if we need to. We're on septic now. We may have to continue to be on septic. Not ideal. Well, long story short, we get to earlier this year in early February, we had a draft letter agreement go back and forth between the lawyers, our outside counsel, as well as SIUC's, focused on all the issues related simply to provide sewer connection. And the town was going to cover all the costs associated with that. That was all baked in to that. There were a number of other provisions, but all related to providing sewer service. We had a meeting in mid-March over at Seabrook Town Hall. You were at that meeting, and quickly became clear that if Seabrook Island Utility Commission was to provide sewer service, there would be other conditions attached to that would wholly unrelated to the provision of sewerage and the cost thereof, or
Call them demands.
engineering and technical issues.
They were more demands.
Okay. One of which, a couple of were relatively minor. One of which, that is, the meeting had gone on, it became the end of the meeting, is the Seabrook Island Utility Commission chairman said one other demand.
By the way, one more.
By the way, one more. That the town of Kiowa Island had then and there, in the context of getting agreement on sewer service, agree to SAPOA's proposed inlet relocation.
And they take the sand.
Well, bottom line, I asked, what interest does the utility commission have in an inlet relocation? You don't have any facilities down there, don't worry about any sewerage in there. I said, yeah, the meeting's essentially over. Whatever the town may do with regard to inlet relocation, and I'm going to touch upon that, there is no connection whatsoever between those two things. Inlet relocation raises a fundamentally different set of environmental considerations, financial considerations, policy considerations, and legal considerations. Whether or not, at the end of the day, one concludes an inlet relocation somewhere at some point may be meritorious, it's got nothing to do with providing sewer connection the 200 yards from here to the force main across the street. So we continued down. As a result of that, kind of discussions just ended.
Well, that's also because they had contacted.
No, we don't know. We don't know that. We don't know that. But in any event, we've proceeded down the path in terms of doing our design for this project and assuming that we're going to have to go the septic path at this point in time. And that's kind of built into the planning process. We are fully permitted by the Department of Environmental Services to do that. It's unfortunate in a couple of respects. Obviously environmentally, also just it means parking becomes a little bit more complicated and we're less kind of flexibility in what we're able to do from a design standpoint. But having said that, my intention is to go back one last time. We've got a draft letter that will either go out today or tomorrow morning back to Seabrook Island Utility Commission and reiterate basically the issues that we had addressed back in the February letter, which is we'd still like to have sewer connection and we're willing to pay the cost associated with that. There are no engineering challenges that have been identified by our engineers. So we hope in the context of doing something good for the environment, good for the community, it's no cost to them, that they will be a good neighbor and agree to the sewer connection. Whether or not they will, there's a short time fuse on that because we're going to have to move forward with septic otherwise.
We have approval for septic.
Yes, we do.
We have a permit now.
Can I ask a question? I see Donna and Kim sitting here also. I saw at their presentation last Tuesday, you guys are very big on elimination of septic. I don't know if you don't want to be, but it seems like maybe if that's one of your missions, that maybe that could help drive getting off of septic.
This is one that I've frankly just been wrong on, and I'll acknowledge that. I was optimistic that cooler heads would prevail, and at the end of the day, we would be able to work out an agreement with Seabrook Island Utility. That hasn't been the case thus far. Whether that changes here within the next 30 to 45 days, which is kind of the drop-dead deadline, we'll see. But if not, we'll simply proceed.
But we're going forward because we now have the septic
Yes.
design finalized. So it's not going to hold up the project.
That's correct.
We just would prefer to be environmentally friendly.
Yes, absolutely. So that kind of brings me to Captain Sam Spit Part 2 and the proposed inlet relocation. And I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school. I think we'd mentioned this publicly, but the Conservancy did host a presentation that included the engineers, Coastal Sciences Engineering, on behalf of SEPOA with regard to the proposed inlet relocation. SEPOA has, and we previously discussed this, talked about, they filed an application with the Army Corps of Engineers. At the end of the day, any inlet relocation project would have to have Army Corps approval. That's one of the necessary steps, but it is not a sufficient step. There are a lot of other stakeholders. You would also have to have county, state DES, and probably DNR. You'd have to actually have the property owners sign off on this, and we don't actually, property ownership of the spit is still unresolved absent the settlement agreement. But, and I want to make this crystal clear for anybody that's interested in this project, is that at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if everybody else in the world wants this project to go forward. The town of Kiowa Island and this body has to approve it as well. There are multiple town ordinances implicated, including one which says pretty directly, no inlet relocation unless permitted by the town, but there are many others as well. There are, again, significant, what I've tried to convey to everybody is, I'm completely open-minded on whether this makes the best long-term sense. Because the town has undertaken this, well, the town hasn't, this project has been undertaken 3 times previously, apparently with relatively little town involvement or input at all, for whatever reason. That's not going to be the case this time. If and when SEPOA, since they're the advocate for this, wants to come forward to the town and make a formal application for a project, then we will begin a process at that point in time. It will be a fairly extensive process, a review process to, again, understand all the environmental impacts and implications, what the alternatives are, what the economic implications. There is literally 10, 20, $30 million worth of sand.
And at a minimum, they're going to need to drive heavy equipment on our beach.
Lots of noise.
Yeah, so, yes, so all of those issues, and again, there are some policy and there are some interesting state law issues that are involved. But we'll begin that process at that point in time. But
So it
now,
seems like-
so now we don't have anything pending before us.
It seems this would be more than an administrative process, more than a permitting process. It would be public hearings and stuff
Oh,
like
yes.
that.
I mean, could the town, it could be an administrative process, because we simply, just like we issue permits for this, that, and the other thing, that's an administrative process. It would be my expectation that relevant committees would be assigned a role in this. There would be public hearings, public workshops. We would probably have to retain additional outside engineering expertise. Given the fact that, Coastal Science Engineering has advised us and prepared a recent report, but they're advising SEPOA on this particular
I was
project.
going to ask about that, and it came up when they were here a couple months ago. It seems CSE is conflicted supporting SEPOA because our body of evidence for 20 years, they developed. And so we're really at a disadvantage if all of a sudden they're advising somebody and reinterpreting our body of evidence differently.
Well, I think that question was posed by Councilmember Kay when CSE was here about Patrick Barano, and he was saying, as an independent engineer, I can make up my own mind, but nonetheless, I think it behooves us to have additional advice and expertise. We did get another expert, we did not get, but there was another expert view represented at the program that the Conservancy put together. Again,
I'm suggesting a stronger stance, perhaps, though, that CSE not be allowed to represent SEPOA, because it's like having our attorney managing our family's assets for our whole life. He says, I'm done with you, I'm going to go represent these guys now. You got the keys to the kingdom.
Well, I don't know in the engineering world if they're the same types of, you would have to have gotten a waiver in the legal world for.
They're licensed.
But I'm not sure there's the same type
There's an
of
ethics
conflicts
board.
rules.
The guy to ask is Ross Appel. He's been adverse to them a couple times, I think on similar issues.
Exactly. Okay.
I think that's a real problem.
But,
Definitely can
and I get that, but I
Already
will
are
take it, I
consultant.
will take everything they say with a grain of salt. They're smart guys. They've been doing this a long time. Of course, it's in their economic interest.
I'm just saying, they already are consultant.
Yeah,
You can't go
yes.
be here to theirs now, too.
Yeah. So anyway, just the key here is you have our kind of next door neighbor that wants to undertake a project that clearly has significant benefit for Seabrook Island and the Property Owners Association, a less clear benefit for Kiowa, whether it's a net benefit long-term for the ecosystem, natural ecosystem, including Captain Sam Spit and the inlet. I think we need to learn a lot more.
It was very interesting in attending the Conservancy's presentation that two different bodies could see the same challenge in such very, very different ways. It was illuminating, but also confusing.
But again, right now, we've got nothing to actually act on or
Nothing to act
consider.
on, right.
There have been representations made by SEPOA, and I think even maybe at this particular presentation, I think it was in the USACE materials, that they had met with the key stakeholders, including the town. Well, that was what they were referring to is a single hour-long meeting they had with me to talk about, gee, we've done this before, we'd like to do it again, and that was a year and a half ago, in which I said at that point in time, I'm open-minded, but we'll have to undertake a process, and I did say, and I kind of still believe this, but you know, given what has transpired, might have to refresh my thinking on this, is if it was beneficial to Seabrook and not at all detrimental in any way to Kiowa Island, and you could work out all the legal and financial issues, then, you know, being a good neighbor is something we would certainly look to be.
But
I'll leave it at that.
goes both ways.
So that's my rather lengthy update on recent issues. Councilmember Berner.
Well, I'm going to be shorter. I'll skip over a number of things. First of all, I wanted to say the circle looks great, Mayor.
Yeah.
It looks great. That was a nice job that you took forward for us. That was great.
I was not out there with a shovel. I didn't design it. Staff designed it. They worked with actually the ARB and came up with the plan. The one thing, but thank you, and I was going to touch upon this when we talk about the annexation, but this is just simply the first phase
Right.
of a kind of a beautification as well as safety enhancements along this stretch of
It looks
Betsy Pierce.
great. I'm very, very pleased with it. I'm sure everybody in the community is. To get through this quickly, on June 11th, the mayor and I attended a meeting with Charleston County for hurricane preparedness. Without getting into the details, the only thing I wanted to bring out to the community is more of a public service announcement. There are 3 evacuation zones, A, B, and C. We, the Barrier Islands, are Zone A. We're the first to go. We had a big discussion with the members from Charleston County about their modeling for how to evacuate, when to evacuate, how long it takes, et cetera, and so forth. The big takeaway at the meeting was, if those of us in Zone A that are supposed to go first do not go first, you wait and see what the forecast is going to tell you. You're going to wait and see if it's still going to be sunny out. You wait until Zone B decides to evacuate. Their modeling says that it will take 44 hours to get out because all of the Zone B people are clogging the roads in front of us. Just wanted to have that message to the community that you're going to be faced with a more than 40-hour duration to get out of the danger zone if you wait to go later. That's the big point that I wanted to let you know. The only other big thing that happened here, I unfortunately had a conflict. I couldn't go, but there was an active shooter drill here on the island. Craig Harris, our safety supervisor, attended. I wish I can have firsthand stories of what happened, but Mr. Harris indicated it was a great success because it highlighted holes that we needed to fix. Not anything that wasn't fixable, but one of them, as you can imagine, is communication. Communication is always the issue, no matter if it's hurricane preparedness or active shooter or whatever it happened to be. But improving the communications between the emergency or the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, and those out in the field is very important. To the point that Mr. Harris is going through and he just prepared a draft of a new emergency operations plan. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to go through this drill again in the fall, see how we are doing better. I'm sure that we will. But the big takeaway is I am so happy that we were being proactive and we're going through an active shooter drill. But it's not just for the active shooter, it's also for any kind of thing. You can have a chemical spill on the island. Same kind of protocols are going to be needed to make sure that people in one area are isolated from the area, are shut down, stay at home, don't open the windows, et cetera, and so forth. So this kind of drill, which primarily was for active shooter, is also beneficial for like chemical spills and things of that nature. So I just wanted to let you know we're going through a very good proactive plan to do these emergency unexpected catastrophe kind of drills to help the community. Mr. Mayor.
Can I
Yes.
just jump in on that real quick? That I'm glad also. We had an active shooter a little less than 2 years ago. So it's a great thing to rehash. And Craig and I also talked about things like the shelter in place has to go out. Do we do the text push and things like that? How do they go through that? So all those things, I'm glad you guys are looking at that.
And we'll do it again in the fall. You can come play with us if you want.
Well, thanks.
Okay.
Councilmember Kay.
Yes, my takeaway from what Russ just said is that being in Zone A, if they tell me to evacuate, I'm going.
That is the takeaway.
Yeah.
That is the takeaway.
So as far as updates from my neck of the woods, we have been actively involved in the interview process for selecting a new resiliency director for the island. We had a couple dozen resumes. We whittled that down and have been conducting interviews last week, and we finish up this week. And hopefully, in another couple of months, we will have somebody on board who will take over what I consider to be an extremely important position for the town to move forward on all of its environmental and resiliency and sustainability initiatives. So more to come when we've got that process completed and a selection made. The only other thing I wanted to do was a shout out to the Island Connection, because while I know that we have the usual suspects who attend our meetings and droves and droves of people who watch us online and our follow-up on YouTube, it still appears that there are people who don't know everything that we're doing here, despite the fact that we've got really intriguing and sometimes even titillating meetings. Anyway, the Island Connection really performs this incredible service. None of you are Island Connection reporters, are you? Well, they must watch our broadcast, because they really accurately and comprehensively track what goes on here at the town. And I have a whole lot of people here and on Seabrook who are aware of what we're doing here because of the Island Connection. So A public note of thanks out to those folks. They're doing an incredible public service, and we really appreciate it.
Councilmember Farrell.
I'm going to keep mine really short because we did do the financial review of LGIP. That's something we've had on the docket for a while. We finally got that done, and I was happy to see that Mike did such a nice job in the presentation, being comprehensive. And then I'm going to be short on the budget, just to say that Dorada's going to talk about the budget in a minute. But we are in very good shape financially. We're going to add to our fund balances significantly this year, well above what we did last year. That might change next year as the building comes online and we pay for some of the building, but right now our overall financial picture and our fund balances are very, very strong. The expectation in our budget was to be down in interest earned this year. We're probably going to come in at right about 4%. I think we used 3.5 or so in our budget. And so whether you like higher rates or not, if you don't have to refinance and you have money earning interest, it's a good thing for you and town for sure. So that's all I
I have
meant.
a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The $53 million that were referenced in Mike's presentation, does that represent our network? Or what does that represent?
Yeah, you could think about it like that. We have $53 million that the mayor always talks about, what are we going to do with that money? But we have a
That's the
very nice
53.
cushion for things like if we had an emergency, if there was a storm, if the town shut down for 2 years, we could still keep the staff operating. We could pay for the building if we needed to buy additional properties to expand and do things. We've got a lot of money to do that. If we want to enter into partnerships with other organizations to do certain things, we've got money to do that. So we're very healthy. We put together a long-term capital plan earlier this year, and that only turned out to be about $15 to $20 million as we look at it over the next 10 years. So we're in very good shape financially. So we don't have to think about raising taxes or even raising fees with anybody unless there's a fairness issue with the fees. So very healthy.
A few things, I'll go as quick as I can. The Infrastructure Public Works Committee is changing the date and time for our meeting this month and going forward, as we're trying to make it so that particularly not just our members, but committee members, but our stakeholders on the island are able to participate. So it's going to be Tuesday the 14th, a week from today, from 1 to 3. And we're going to try to keep it on the second Tuesdays from 1 to 3. That seems to be working for everybody looking ahead. So like so many committees, we've got major infrastructure holders in this regard, the resort, the KICA, and the club that participate, and that really helps. So glad for their participation. I echo the mayor's thanks for the public safety teams. I mentioned during his comments, I saw them out there a lot myself. I will say I saw something really impressive. We were stopped at the general store on Beachwalker waiting to be flagged through, and somebody didn't want to wait. And so, or they didn't know what was going on or something, didn't know why we were all sitting there. So as people do, they pulled around and got into the lane that goes towards the park down Beachwalker. I saw Kent come off his dime and back up, back up. And it was priceless. And Craig was there, he saw it. So it was good to see him when he needed to perform, not just, the day-to-day steady state. As far as the conservation fund that we're working on, we have drafted an ordinance and a policy resolution on that. Town administrator and I have been working on that. Mayor's seen it and commented on it. We're pursuing some other reviews, including legal review. Maybe we'll get it teed up in time for next month's council meeting. That's the objective. We'll see if we get there, but if something else edges it out. But otherwise, our intent is to have that available for council to review and have it first reading at the next council meeting to keep that moving along. I've been asked a few times about this, so I just thought I'd clarify from my perspective. If you want to comment, Mr. Mayor, you can. The dumpsters and recycling that are being taken out of the KICA compound, the communications say questions, contact town of Kiowa Island. And so people have approached me, why is the town pulling that out? The town isn't. The town's happy to leave it there. I believe that's your sentiment as well. That's Brian's when I talked to him. KICA made some decisions based off of some considerations they've got. that they can't support it there anymore because there's some constraints and other kinds of activities going on that in their mind warranted removing them, and that's fine. It's been brought to me, let's find an alternative location, you've seen that as well, or more frequent pickup times at Sora Rail and at the town. I know the staff's taken a look at that. I don't know what other alternate locations there would be, but that was not a town decision. We're happy to support that, and we understand Kika made the decision, and that's their decision. Short-term rental rules, the mayor pro tem and I chaired a ad hoc committee on short-term rentals earlier this year. One thing I followed up on that I didn't know if we touched on or not was we came up with a nice visual aid that needs to go up in all the short-term rentals, so we passed out to all the rental companies. Thanks to communication staff and a bunch of other people that pulled that together. I wasn't sure that we required it in our ordinance, but Mr. Whitaker showed me that, yes, it is required. So I know he sent it to him a few times. He's probably going to send it to him with a copy of the ordinance now to make sure that that's in there. But this is the time of year we saw a lot of bad behavior. So I thought maybe this is the time to check and make sure that we're complying with what we're supposed to be doing. So thanks to the staff for all the work on that. Many people probably saw the IKEA email last night about cell towers. I was asked who authorized that in one private email, and we don't authorize IKEA. People do what they do. And if somebody wants to reach out to Public Utilities Commission, please do. I mean, that's your call. If you think that'll help, please do. I appreciated the comment about how we are looking at it. We will provide a better update, I think, soon. We're in that, like many projects, we're kind of in the slow period where a lot of things, bureaucracy, red tape happens, especially with the Ocean Course site, which is the first site, and the town and the resort and Crown Council are working through some boundary issues and some stuff for the site plan to get that worked out. And that just takes a little bit of time. And it's typical, it takes 18 to 24 months from the point you say go on a cell tower build to actually get a cell tower turned on. So this is the kind of stuff that adds into that 18 and 24 months. Mr. Taylor and I have met in the middle of June with Crown Castle to keep a pulse and keep driving their involvement in not only the Ocean Course site, but the other sites and keeping those progressing. We also met with Berkeley Electric, who owns the site at Vanderhorst, and have some information on that we'll work through about some alternatives we want to look at with that site. And we are also meeting again with the cellular companies, T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T, on the 21st, I believe it is, and just keep the momentum alive with them as well. So we're doing what we think is the appropriate pushing and letting people do their jobs and the balance between that, because it is a complex thing with a lot of moving parts putting cell towers in. But the trajectory and the momentum is positive. It's going forward. I wish it had happened 5 years ago, but it didn't, just like so many people, but it's happening now. And so we'll continue to keep pushing that forward. You mentioned, Mr. Mayor, the gate policy and access, and I've been thinking about that as well because it came up extensively at the Infrastructure Public Works Committee, and then it came up again at the Kiowa Alliance that you and others commented on. I echo your thoughts. I'm glad that you and staff are meeting with Kika on this. I think it's a really great step that they're bringing MC Dean in to take a look at this. They're a great national player. They have a lot of insights. They have a lot of ideas. They'll understand how policy and technology need to work together to make this happen. I have been concerned that we have unnecessary fences, perhaps, between players and stakeholders that I hope we can work through. Like you said, the town commits significant resources to the gate. Anything that happens at the gate is going to be a multi-party activity. And I hate to see a study published without being fully informed with data the town has and inputs the town has as well. Because there's too many times I've seen something baked and you say, but you didn't ask us about this. You didn't ask us about, we didn't get a chance to tell you about that. Oh, wish we'd known that, those kinds of things. So I hope that the town has a chance to participate and input on that. And I think about things that I spent most of my adult life going to work on military bases every day. And they can get 15,000 people to work pretty quickly through the base, plus city buses, plus visitors, plus a lot of people. There's ways to do this. And we're talking about an island with private residences and stuff like that, but on military bases with nukes and F-35s, you can do that. So I think there's a way to get it done. So I hope that we get some good results out of that study and are able to come together across all the stakeholders and get that done. And then, as I was reflecting on being on town council one morning, I forget when it was, I was thinking about some of the things we're working through, and you know, I think about development. We've talked about that a lot, and some other things. And you know, some of these development agreements have been in place for 40 or 50 years, and it kind of reinforced to me, and I think you all share this sentiment, but I want to say it publicly, that as we go through some of the things we're working, we all have been wanting to modernize and update ordinances, make sure they reflect the current and future state. And I really hope in 40 or 50 years somebody says, they were really trying to think this through, because we are. and I hope that this stuff, barring the need for, you know, tweaks along the way as life happens, that we're putting together a good foundation of, and I think we are, that will persist over time. So I'm hopeful for that.
Thank you.
All my
The
comments.
town administrator's report.
Just a couple operational things. One, we have a blood drive scheduled for July 31st from 10 to 3 here in the parking lot. There will be information pushed out in the e-blast. We have flyers here, so please sign up if you're interested. Our Food Truck Fridays is back this Friday. We skipped 4th of July weekend, but it's back in the menu. The restaurants and list of menus is on our website, as well as it will be pushed out in our e-blast. Also, next week, King Tides, expect that, July 13th and 14th. Turtle Nest, Pierce from conversations with Jim in our senior staff meeting, they're going to have a bang-up year, probably exceeding 19 and 22 numbers, I believe, as of yesterday when he reported. They had 396 compared to 158 this time last year. So, great job there. Also, you already mentioned the trash. I won't mention that, but it will be removed from the Beach Walker Center, which is Kika's location, on July 9th, 10th. We have scheduled to pick that up. And again, that was a Kika decision. They're looking at doing some improvements to their parking lot. They just need to gain some additional spaces there. I know we've talked about our website. Meredith and her team, our Communication Public Affairs Director, and her team, right now we're working with Revise. We have done the mitigation over, but all that does is they bring all that information from our current website to the new one. We have to go in and clean it up, and they're in the process of doing that. So their goal, my understanding is that they hope to have this completed within probably the next couple of weeks, so that we can at least kind of beta check it amongst a few of us before we release that live. And then just two more things. I want to acknowledge a couple of staff members from June and July. I missed June last month, but we have two members celebrating their anniversaries. Danielle Hensley, who works in communication. She's been with us for 1 year. And Tim McGuire is one of our inspectors. He's been with the town for 4 years. And this month, we have Leo Hall, who works in our building department. He's one of the inspectors as well, 10 years. Bruce Spiker, who's our building official, 10 years. And Daniel Green, who's a plans examiner in the building services, 7 years. So I'd like to recognize them. And just, I've already talked about the water pressure. One thing, and I know it was small, I just want to mention two things. This was fortunately impacted a lot of also customers on the Sea Island, so this wasn't just isolated, but they are, and I agree, maybe bring them in and see kind of if they have any more information beyond today. They did push out, information on the website, very limited information. Once they found out that it was potentially reoccurring issue, they did push something on the website. Again, it just told customers low pressure. They didn't have very much to tell at that point, but they had something. What they asked me to do was just to let people know that if you go to Johns Island website, you can sign up for alerts. So if they do have problems in the future, you will then receive an alert via text or email. So we will somehow, one of our e-blasts, at least let people know that they can sign up for alerts so that they can get alerts in case there's any problems in the future. And, Mr. Mayor, that's all that I have.
Stephanie, do you
Yes,
have to
sir.
sign up for the blood drive, or can you just show up?
You have to sign up for the, and they also have a $70 gift card with that. But there's a link in our e-blast that you can just hit that and easily sign up for it.
Sent a separate email yesterday on it, too.
Yes, she sent a separate one, and there'll be a one as well Thursday. So we'll keep pushing it out.
Just one follow-up on the trash management issue that Councilmember Spencer and Stephanie raised, is that even before the forthcoming, in the next couple of days, removal of the Beachwalker Center, there have been overflow issues there as well as at Kestrel Court. That's likely to be more pronounced. Whether more pickups or not are the right issue, but I mean, this is a service or accommodation that the town provides for the benefit of residents. Otherwise, you can take bulk trash to Bees Ferry, where the rest of the county does. If this becomes, people have abused both sites, and we can't have that persist, particularly if we're down a site. We've sent out a notice just over the last day or two to all contractors, service providers, and others that they're just for the use of residents only. It's not for commercial debris. We do have cameras there, but we also need the community to be responsible as well in their use of their sites. Otherwise, they just may not be there any longer, and you can just drive to Bees Ferry.
There was a boat here last week.
Yes, there was a boat. Somebody,
Who got that boat, by the way?
it wasn't much of a boat.
It wasn't much of a boat, but I'm sure somebody got it.
It was a boat. Are we to get a budget report?
I do have a brief report for the 11 months ending at the end of May. And as of that day, we had collected about 17 million in revenues, which is about 97% of the total budgeted. So overall, our revenues are tracking well, and are expected to finish the year, pretty much all of them are going to be above the budget. And the strong revenue performance continues to come from the building permits, business licenses, and interest earnings. As far as the expenditures, our expenditures are about 10.9 million, which is about 72% of the current budgeted for this year. And they are all pretty much remain reasonable within the time of the year and consistent with expected operating activity for this point in a fiscal year. And we will probably end up a little less than budgeted. We were just talking about our projections. So we were originally projecting or budgeting to put in reserves $2.5 million, but it's going to be probably more to 4.
The finance director continues to be both conservative on the revenues collected and conservative on
yes,
the
but
actual
also,
budget expenditures.
Also, if you remember, we talk about even last meeting that the tourism continues to grow. So all the accommodation taxes, hospitality taxes. We also last year, as you remember, changed or increased slightly the business license fees. We based those projections on last year gross receipts reported, but it looks like they were also higher. So it's a combination of a lot of items, and better be on the conservative side than a spender.
Any questions for our finance director?
No? Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to old business, the first item of old business is second final reading of the annexation of about a third of a mile stretch of road from the county. We've already approved this on first reading. The language hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed in the interim is about just a little less than 2 weeks ago, is that the county did approve on third and final reading the ordinance authorizing conveyance of that third of a mile stretch. I just want to make clear that what we're doing is completing the annexation process. The county had previously approved during first reading or approved a resolution which provided the requisite consent under state law for us to go ahead with the annexation wholly apart from conveyance. My understanding is kind of where we are is the town's got to work out with county council, but we've got to send them. They want us to send deed language.
Yeah, James has drafted, and I think we're just waiting on blessing from a real estate lawyer.
Okay.
And then we'll circulate that to them, and there should be no issue,
Yeah,
though.
no issue at that point in time. So, but we're going to go ahead with second and final reading. So that's background and context. I would entertain a motion for approval of ordinance 2026-10.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion or questions? Just again, I would reiterate that we intend to continue to move forward, particularly now will own and have within the town's municipal boundaries, both inbound and outbound lanes. We'll continue with traffic calm and safety and landscape improvements, including along the medians and the right-of-way, going both directions going forward.
Now, Mr. Mayor, the only thing I would just say is, again, I think this is a super idea. It gives us control over the road. There's improvements needed that the state is not going to do and we can do, both from a safety standpoint and from an aesthetic standpoint. So I think this is a great effort that we've undertaken.
Any further questions or discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second item of old business is to consider approval of ordinance 2026-11, second and final reading. As you may recall, this is our ordinance putting in place an ordinance to actually prohibit signage other than that specifically authorized or permitted by the town on the town's roads or right-of-way. There's only one minor change to the language you will note, just because it's going to be a civil infraction rather than a misdemeanor, is it removes the conviction in a court. There may well be that we will come back at a subsequent time we've discussed this with Mac and his colleague, how best to treat civil infraction issues going forward. So we may come back with some additional modifications to this particular provision. But it would probably be in the context of a broader range of changes to our municipal code dealing with how we handle misdemeanors and civil infractions.
Yeah, one of my questions with respect to this is, during the political elections, if somebody puts up 10 signs, is that just one infraction, or is it 10 infractions?
I think it's per sign.
Okay? I would suggest making that clear then.
No, I think we would have the administrative discretion to declare each one a separate violation.
So the issue that has come up over the last year has been a rally on town property, for instance, to commemorate a particular issue or cause. Well, how, to clarify for the public, how will that process now be handled?
This has nothing to do with that, unless somebody's affixing a sign into the road or right-of-way. We are separately in the process of developing a new event permit process to be able to address those kinds of issues. To be clear, this would not in and of itself prohibit anybody, even in our right-of-way, holding signs. This is in placing signs in our right-of-way. But we'll need to come back with council on whether it'll be ready our next meeting or not, kind of first draft of that. We do need a special events permit that goes well beyond what we have right now, which is simply embedded in our business licensing provision of the municipal code.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on the civil penalties? I'm trying to understand the context. You're talking about more than just signs. You're talking about all ordinance violations and.
Yeah, this is something you may recall. I think I first raised this 2 years ago in strategic planning meetings. Right now, the way our municipal code works is that every violation of a code provision, if you pay the fine, even if you don't come to court, you've pled guilty to a misdemeanor, a crime.
Like parking, that was one of the issues, yeah.
But literally, whether it's littering, digging holes in the sand, I mean, you could kind of go on and on and on. No noise ordinance violations, et cetera. South Carolina is somewhat unique in that regard. Most other states have embedded, and there's nothing, by the way, in South Carolina law that prohibits the concept of civil infraction versus criminal misdemeanors. We would still have a lot of our, harassment of alligators, harassment of community service officers, public intoxication. There's a whole host of general offenses would still all be misdemeanor offenses, but a lot of things like this would be a civil infraction, and it can be resolved without involvement of the court. One could always appeal to a body, whether you want to set up a separate administrative appeal process or not. As you may recall, we already have a separate non-criminal court process for business licenses, revocation, short-term license. Remember, the town council actually heard the appeal from from one or more short-term rental license things. So this is going to try to kind of rationalize our code and come back to the council with, here are all the code provisions that would constitute civil infractions. You can pay a fine. You don't have to involve the court. If you want to appeal it, you can. You can appeal it to a court. It's not a jury trial. It's a hearing. It's not. You're not convicted. You're found to be responsible or not. A misdemeanor, you are convicted of a misdemeanor offense, a crime. There are different. Correct me if I'm wrong in anything here, Counselor, but there are different evidentiary standards. In a civil infraction, it's, and again, admission of responsibility or not, and that's a preponderance of the evidence. Whereas if you're convicted of a criminal offense, it's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
I thank you for expanding on that. And I may have said this when this came up before, but I think that's very important to sort out. There's a lot of careers and other life things that go on that a misdemeanor is life ruining. And, I'm in the national security business. I mean, if one of my employees would have gotten a misdemeanor, the security officer would have called me because they catch that. Even if it was in TO Island, they'll catch that. If you're in a child shared custody situation, a misdemeanor avoids your spouse or your parental, and if somebody's digging a hole with their kids during their custody period, they lose their custody over something like that. I mean, we could really screw up somebody's life if we're not careful.
Well, it's a fairly involved process, but we'll work with Mac and his colleague to try to rationalize all this. Okay. But we went a little further afield in this, but this is, any other questions or comments about the sign ordinance? Then all in favor of approval of ordinance 2026-11?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. New business, moving right along. This is kind of one of those check the box things, formalities. It's to consider approval of the Charleston Area Regional Transportation Authority proposed fiscal year budget, and that's under tab 5. I don't know if we have anybody. Okay, yeah. Hello, thank you. Not to say you're not going to get questions, but
just hitting on your check the box. This is a requirement as a member of Charleston County. We are, and CARTA is required to come to each municipality to get approval from each municipality for our budget for each year. So we present to you Exhibit 5, this year's 2027 budget.
So maybe questions before we entertain approval, not discussion, but questions. Just to confirm, the town of Key Island does not contribute anything to the CARTA budget directly?
Charleston County,
Charleston County does.
correct. Charleston County dollars are the main contributor, especially since this year we had a reduction in federal funding, so.
And the reason you're coming to us is because by charter, Key Island has a seat at the table. We're a member of CARTA.
Through the county, correct.
Through the county, is that right?
Charleston County.
Okay. I don't know, other kind of questions. I mean, the obvious one is we've had staff in before. We do have, I guess, TriLink that comes down here on regular schedules.
Tri-County Link, yes, sir. That's a
Tri-County
separate
Link.
transit system.
It's a completely separate, why does it show up on CARTA's website as part of its map?
That is because of the connectivity.
Okay.
So Tri-County Link is its own entity, which is a rural transportation service.
Okay.
Set up defined rurally, which is again, something that's,
Even though we're within the urban growth
evaluation.
boundary.
But people from Tri-County Link, for instance, people in Monk's Corner, people that from Johns Island, they can connect to the Citadel Mall, which, that bus comes down here, and connect to the CARTA system. So that is why there is a connection, but they are two separate entities.
But that's the only connection is from Freshfields Village up to Citadel Mall, nothing into the city of Charleston directly.
Tri-County Link, yes, correct, comes down.
You don't have bus service or any service on Maybank or planned in the near future?
Maybank, no, the only service that comes down Main Road, comes from Citadel Mall to.
So, but that's Tri-County.
That's Tri-County Link.
So, I mean,
CARTA.
the question that's always befuddled
Correct.
me, and I think it befuddles a lot of folks it appears that CARTA is supposed to provide public transportation to the Charleston area. It does not provide any service onto Johns Island. And it does on James Island, it does up and down the peninsula, it does to Mount Pleasant, I mean, it goes to West Ashley. There's no CARTA service onto Johns Island. And is that, I mean, to your point, it seems so obvious, especially since it's in the city of Charleston.
Yeah, I think, so two things. So one is we going through our comprehensive analysis we just finished. Part of that is the Tri-County Link is considered, and the way the FTA looks at things is what's rural and what's not rural is a lot different than when the system was set up initially. So Johns Island was effectively considered rural which is covered by Tri-County Link. So that's why we're looking at the overall picture through the analysis. How can we look at, because again, to your point is you have all these new people.
But 20-some% of the Johns Island is in the city of Charleston. That's not very
Understood. No,
rural.
Understood.
I think the point the mayor's trying to make is we would like to receive better services. Probably the biggest problem we have, one of the biggest problems, is getting employees here because of the distance. And some sort of public transportation would help alleviate the cost, make it more economically attractive for folks to work down here or want to work down here.
Absolutely.
And so I guess we'd like to know what we would need to do or advocate for more and better service for folks coming from all over the greater Charleston area to here for work.
I think those discussions have been ongoing since.
They have been.
They have, but let's separate out the two things. One is potentially for employees and others getting all the way down to Freshfields Village. But simply having public transit go across the Stono River along Maybank, which is a commercial core right now directly into Charleston. You look at the map and you're going, there's nothing on Johns Island at all.
Absolutely. Well, and that's, again,
I particularly picked on Maybank.
Yeah, yes.
Because I'm a very strong advocate for the Barrier Island Free Medical Clinic, which is used, I think you have to be below a really low poverty line in order to use it. People who work here in the island use it. And right now, the challenge that just really burns me, there's no way for someone to get there except walk.
The Tri-County Link does serve that center, sir, just so you know.
I have a lot of friends who volunteer their time as doctors and nurses there, and they say they have 90% of them are walking a mile or more to get there.
The map
The Tri-County
show-
Link service does show that.
Sure, Bear
If you
Island-
go to ridetricountylink.com and
Well, I was on the map earlier today. It only shows it goes to an MUSC facility on Maybank, right around the intersection of Maybank and Main. But I don't know that it doesn't.
I can tell you that the Tri-County Link bus system does go to that center because I was literally filming a commercial and riding the bus, and we dropped 3 people off at that center. So that, again, Tri-County Link,
So in
totally
the
separate.
comprehensive planning process, again, because I know the
has
county
been-
council, Johns Island Task Force, literally just going along Maybank into the city of Charleston. What's the prospect for getting public transportation along Maybank into the city of Charleston?
that's in consideration with the comprehensive plan. A lot of that has come up in that. And again, that process where we're at, we did all of our public engagement, which included that side of town. And now went through the survey, so now we're bringing that together and the consultants are looking at that. But again, I will say though, too, the FTA does factor into that because there is still that, since this has been 10 years since we did the last one, there is some maneuvering, I would say, that has to probably happen because of how the FTA is looking at it based on how we do living here. So
What percentage of your budget is federal transportation administration funds versus all other funding sources?
the RTMA, the Tri-County Link budget is very small.
No, for CARTA's budget, how much is, you're saying this is dependent, the reason you're doing this is because of FTA, the way FTA looks at this.
We just had a reduction of funding, if you look at the budget, so in 2026 was 14.5 million, it's down to 9.5 million.
So, that's what I'm trying to figure out. You're saying this is all being driven by an increasingly small.
I'm not saying that, I'm saying that, again, some of this has been driven by the community too, and, it's part of the process. Again, this hasn't been done in 10 years, when Johns Island looked different. So now, we're looking at that process, so. But obviously, we're not all blind to that, but it does take infrastructure and it does take, additional funding, based on what we already have to increase that to serve this area. And we do need to have that need and show that there is that need, so.
So I've been somewhat involved in this. I haven't gone to many of the CARTA board meetings, but I did go to some maybe a year or so back. And I do know that back then there was a big reluctance, and I'm actually going to get somewhere that you'll like, I think, but to even look at Johns Island, look at Kiowa, stuff like that. I think that sentiment has changed. CARTA sent, I just forgot her name, Craig. What was the name who came to the strategy meeting? Ron came and the lady, Andrea came to our strategy meeting and talked with us to try to get a sentiment and share updates. Ron and Andrea both came to the Infrastructure Public Works Committee, and we discussed that as well. And what was important about that meeting was, while the town, I think, has the ability to convene, really the demand comes from the private employers on the island. And so kind of the next step was the private employers needed to do some engagement, and they declined because of various reasons. And that actually came up at the Kiowa Alliance meeting as well, housing and transportation and things like that. And I put that back on the table again from the cheap seats and said, hey, this is out there. And it was kind of the same sentiment of, yeah, but that doesn't really work for how we're trying to operate. So I do think the dialogue has improved. I do think that directionally CARTA is more tuned into here. I do agree with the mayor's comment about Maybank. It's very commercialized now, so I think that that's probably a good first step. But I do want to acknowledge that there's been better engagement, better, I think, appreciation for the problem the way we see it to help with transit. Not a solution, long ways from a solution, but there's, I think, been much more effort and action.
And I'll just add, piggyback on what everyone said. So with CARTA, the town, we've been working and talking with them. I've been here for 10 years. We've been talking with them for 10 years, and I know that they were in conversations prior to me starting. I think they've always been amenable to it. We've, the last conversation when I was involved, this is probably, say, 5 years ago, it was looking at providing we talked about having a kind of park and ride. We looked at the Citadel, we looked at the old KJ site, and essentially have an express service here. We involved Seabrook and, of course, Kiowa. The resort was at the table. The partners, Kiowa Partners was at the table, and the employer of Seabrook. One of the things that we couldn't really solve for, and so I think those entities walked away, was that a couple of things. One was, okay, we get them here, then how do we get them onto the islands that essentially are gated? The other was, okay, well, if we were to shift them and get them to Citadel Mall, the question is that, okay, as a business, this resort as an example, back 5 years ago, they said, okay, well, we have to go there to essentially, we have to transport them to the Citadel because, for instance, a lot of the workers that are coming here from other countries do not have vehicles. So if we have to go pick them up, we might as well, we already have a bus service, we'll just pick them up and bring them back here. So that may be some of the same things. Now, again, on Maybank, I think, even just from when I've been here for 10 years, it has really grown and developed. So I'm thinking of you guys' new comprehensive plan that before, when it was a little more rural, I think now you're probably looking at that there's more rooftops on
Correct.
Upper Johns Island. So you may be looking at that, and that may be something that you guys are talking about. But just
Well,
a little
to
bit
that
of
point, I
history.
mean, James Island is somehow considered urban, I guess, and Johns Island is not. Although the population of Johns Island is 50% larger than the population of Johns Island, but you provide CARTA service to James Island. And almost all of that population is on the upper half of the island, or majority of it is along Maybank. But again, I just...
No, I understood. I don't disagree with you, and it doesn't make sense to us. We, again, it's why we look at the process. Again, it's 10 years when we look at it. When we look at this analysis, it will look different, to Stephanie's point.
Really, am I hearing you correctly? You can't add a bus line other than every 10 years?
No, that's not what we can, it's just when we're doing the process, what I'm saying is we're doing this analysis in this window because we realize that we have grown exponentially, in 10 years, so let's look at it, and we're looking at that. No, we can do it at any time, but it costs money, and that was a separate line item in funding in 26 to do that, because we recognize that we need to, we're in the business of providing a service. It's a public service. And how do we grow that, to your point, to areas that weren't recognized before that now have grown? And, how do we continue to grow? And again, it's...
So let me ask you a
If
different
it's
question.
successful, just taking cars off of Maybank Highway and going across the Stono River Bridge would be a good
and
thing.
that's, that's that whole conversation about breaking people's habits of using public transit, which we think that, the first LCRT, bus rapid transit that comes in, again, it'll be in 2030. That whole mindset, right, of, getting that to a point where public transit can be truly getting that people to where they need to go, and getting them to use the system to get them, whether they work, play, go to school, all right in those areas.
Well, let me ask you a question about that and about your process. So
sir.
do you, on some frequency, look at kind of different lines and look at what capacity utilization you have on the line, and if it drops to some level like 2%, you shut that line down and redeploy those assets someplace else?
Correct, and that's part of the two.
How often does that happen?
It's an ongoing basis based on, but again, we have, our set lines right now, probably, I would say every year at least, we look at the different lines and see, but, again, and that factors in too, the Johns Island with the distance, so on and so forth.
And then the places where you don't have lines, like we would suggest Maybank, how do you determine the capacity that you would pick up? Is there a way a mechanism you have to determine what the capacity utilization would be if you came down
Know
Maybank?
specifically what that is. I'm sure, our transit planners are the ones that design all that, and they would
Okay.
have that information, but I don't have that.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a science behind it, but again, it comes down to, as far as infrastructure that we have to be able to expand and grow, so.
Yeah, asking it a different way, at what point is the demand, does the demand have to reach in order for you to provide service?
That's a very good question, because again, it's more about, the 10, the 11, some of the North Charleston, where you have the high demand, the Mount Pleasant, because just from the amount of people over there. I'm not sure what that is. I can certainly check with our transit planners and get you that information, but, again, the whole thing with adding different lines in that is to, it comes down to infrastructure and to be able to grow, because ideally, we would like to provide it across the entire county. But again, we have to, there's some factors in there that, obviously it's a planning thing, a transportation planning thing that I'm not, astute to answer that question at this moment.
So, well, thank you. And I would note, I mean, that's why I asked the question. I mean, in contrast, our ability, even though we're this charter member, we're actually not contributing any dollars to support the system. We have a better argument, other than the monies that our property taxes go into Charleston County's general fund, but I think it's out of Charleston County's transportation tax, TST,
Correct, the TST.
that actually
Yes, sir.
monies go here. We have would like to think we'd have a better argument, this came up the Kiawah Island Alliance, given the fact that we disproportionately contribute to Charleston County in the say in some of these issues. That's not the case with CARTA. I appreciate you taking the time to come here.
No, absolutely. It's all well, again, well-versed, and we understand the frustration, and, obviously, we are a public service entity. We want to be able to grow, but there are factors that have to happen in order for that to happen.
And whether or not we actually approve the budget or not, I don't think it matters at the end of the day.
I think Mac answered that last year.
How the process works. But I was just, entertaining motion for approval of the CARTA's fiscal year 2027 budget.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion on this?
Well, the only discussion point is this is my fourth vote.
Yep.
First 2 years I approved, last year I did not. Until there's any hint of service being provided out here, I cannot approve this personally.
So I will share that. Ron and Andrea did put on the table to our employers here that they would meet with them.
I will vote to approve, but with the qualification that, it's really incumbent on CARTA. Again, I just looking at Googling the population of Johns Island versus James Island. It's actually, Johns Island is more than twice as populous as James Island, and there's been service provided to James Island for a long while. So that just has to change. That just has to change.
How big are they compared to each other?
Johns Island is quite a bit larger. Johns Island is actually one of the largest islands in the East Coast. It's the second or third or fourth largest island. But we're only talking about, they run, there's a service that runs all the length of Johns Island. That's all we're talking about really for James Island. For Johns Island, it's literally just the 3 or 4 miles of Maybank.
And I agree with the perspective on that 100%, 110%. That's the densified area that's got the commercial activities, that's got within football fields distance off of Maybank, all kinds of development behind the trees that you can't see that maybe a lot of our staff lives in.
Line on James Island down Folly Road?
Ends at the one that goes down Folly Road ends at the Harris Teeter. It loops around at the Harris Teeter Folly Road.
At the Harris Teeter at Folly
Folly,
Maybank?
Folly. No, Folly and, Folly
Probably
Road.
Maybank.
No, it'd be the
No, it would be
one
All the way
goes
down.
all the
Oh,
way.
you're
Folly
talking about,
Beach.
yeah, no, you're
Toward-
talking about
toward
that,
Folly
I'm sorry.
Down by Wapu.
Folly Beach.
It goes
Well,
all the way
I'm-
down, it goes all the way down. James.
Yeah, I'm gonna be with the mayor and vote for this, but I would really like to see some work done on kind of the analysis of Maybank Highway and just the economics of some of the other routes and utilizations. And I understand there's, you're allocating resources, so there's got to be some place where you shut down one line or one time frame for some place and get just maybe one or two runs on Maybank, beginning of the day and end of the day. But that would be the,
I have
that would be the
noted that, and I
request.
will take that back, and
Yeah.
I will address that with the transportation.
Because I'm looking at the Tri-County Link, and there's nothing on Maybank, and there's nothing on half of River Road, and there's, obviously, you get to James Island, there's nothing on James Island, so I'm assuming that's all CARTA.
Yeah, and that only goes to Citadel Mall.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there needs to be something on Maybank that goes either into town, to Citadel Mall, or both,
Well,
at least in my view.
We'll probably have this, hopefully this isn't the only conversation we have about this. We don't have to wait till next year's budget, and we hopefully, but by that time, there will be something happening. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Okay. The budget is approved on a 3-2 vote. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate the opportunity, and like I said, I will follow up, and
And we know you're just a messenger, so
I
thank you very
am. I
much.
appreciate- no,
Thank you very
it's-
much.
it all makes sense, I appreciate the dialogue, thank you.
Next and last agenda item of new business is approval of a new design review board appointment. John, I don't know if you want to tee this up or not, or there, the materials, the bio is in the materials. John, is the incumbent currently on the tree and landscape ordinance, tree and no, okay. Has been with ARB previously. So more landscape architecture than physical architecture, but as a design professional.
I was very pleased to see this name.
Yeah, looks good.
So I would entertain a motion for approval of the appointment.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Now, any questions or? Okay.
So I just have one, I mean, I've worked with Parker on one project, and I found him to be incredibly flexible and understands his work, and I think he's a great appointment for this design review board. Very reasonable and level-headed, so I'm excited to see him on here.
Resume is good.
I've heard nothing but very positive feedback from the community on his work.
I'm personally familiar with Parker and his experience. Great ad.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We've moved citizen comments before our scheduled executive session. Are there any citizen comments on any agenda item? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to enter executive session pursuant to the relevant code provisions to receive legal advice regarding pending litigation and
So moved.
property acquisition. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Okay, executive session.
No, 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 okay. He wouldn't do that. Okay. He wants, no, he wanted somebody to tell him. I'd love to meet him. All right, no, that works.
I'll already give you the draft too. Is it
I'm
ready?
gonna send out the cancellation today, Mr. Turner, okay?
I agree, I agree. I'll email you Paul's info and you guys can connect. I don't need to be part of that because I'm not a cellular person.
Yeah, I love meeting with artists.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good. Okay, see you in a bit.
Brian? I know I had wished you something, but I can't remember at this time what it is, so Got or not?
Have a good one. There she is.
Well, two of us are back.
I mean, yeah, maybe,
They went home.
maybe they want to stick around till 5. We do have like a 7 or 7:30 dinner, and I told Laura, she said, are you just going to meet me there? And I go, no, we're not.
You have dinner plans?
Yeah.
On a council night?
Yeah. Well, it was 7 or 7:30. I can't. Gentlemen, we need a quorum. I don't, if only one of you, we just need one of you.
Illegal quorum back there.
Just one. Doesn't have to be all of you. I would entertain a motion to return to regular order and exit executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No decisions were made, no actions were taken during executive session. There being no further pending business, are there any additional council member comments? In that case, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Moved.
Second?
Second.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
4:30, Brad.